Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a real energy paradox. Nigeria. Huge oil and gas reserves, right? An economic giant in many ways.
Absolutely.
Yet you've got this staggering reality of energy poverty. We're talking over 90 million people without reliable access to the electricity grid.
It really is a profound gap. And the numbers, well, they really drive it home. Nigeria's per capita electricity consumption, it's tiny. Just 126 kilowatt hours a year.
126. That's hard to even picture. How does that compare regionally?
Well, put it this way. Ghana uses nearly 3 times that much. And South Africa. South Africa consumes about 30 times more per person. It's a different world.
And the knock-on effect for people without stable grid power isn't just inconvenience, it's cost, right? Massive cost.
Exactly. The grid is unreliable, so what happens? People default to backup generators, mostly diesel.
Which isn't cheap.
Not at all. Grid power might be, say, 6 to 9 euro cents per kilowatt hour, theoretically. But running those generators, our source material shows costs jumping to 14, maybe even 22 cents.
So potentially more than double, even triple the official grid cost, just for power that's probably sporadic and definitely polluting.
Precisely. It's an unsustainable situation financially and environmentally, which leads us straight to the core question this research tackles.
How does Nigeria fix this? How does it provide energy and decarbonize at the same time?
Exactly. That's the challenge, and it's why the source material for this deep dive is so important. It's titled Pathways to a Fully Sustainable Electricity Supply for Nigeria in the Midterm Future.
A very focused study, and it comes up with a pretty startling main conclusion, doesn't it?
It really does. The big takeaway, the thing that might surprise a lot of people, is that the analysis found a 100% renewable energy system isn't just some, aspirational goal.
It's feasible.
It's feasible, and it's actually the most cost-competitive path forward for Nigeria. Cheaper than sticking with fossil fuels.
Okay, that's a huge claim. Let's unpack how they reached that. What was the methodology behind this study?
Well, this wasn't just back-of-the-envelope stuff. They used a really sophisticated linear optimization model. Think of it like a simulation tool. It calculated the absolute lowest cost way to build and run Nigeria's power system, hour by hour, simulated all the way out to 2050.
Hour by hour, that's granular.
Very. And they didn't treat Nigeria as one single block either. They divided into 6 distinct subregions or nodes interconnected, looking at investments in 5-year steps. So geography, transmission, local resources, it's all baked in.
Right, making it much more realistic. So this model essentially looked at different possible futures based on policy choices.
Exactly. The study contrasted 2 main directions Nigeria could take. First, what they call the current policy scenario, the CPS.
Which is basically business as usual.
Pretty much. It follows Nigeria's existing energy plans. So, continued reliance on gas turbines, bringing in new coal plants, and even includes plans for about 4.8 gigawatts of nuclear power by 2035. It's the fossil-heavy trajectory.
Okay, that's path 1. What's the alternative they modeled?
That's the best policy scenario, BPS. This one is designed differently. Its target is explicitly 100% renewable energy and 0 greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, fully aligned with the Paris Agreement.
So a complete paradigm shift. And every decision in that BPS model was driven by hitting that zero emission goal at the minimum possible cost.
That's the core idea, cost optimization towards a fully renewable future.
Okay, let's get to the bottom line then. The costs. You mentioned the LCOE, the levelized cost of electricity. How did the 2 scenarios compare on that metric?
The difference is stark. In the current policy scenario, the fossil fuel heavy one, the LCOE, actually goes up significantly over time.
Even with existing infrastructure plans?
Yes. If you factor in a cost for carbon emissions, the study calls it a GHG cost, the LCOE in that scenario balloons to around 120 euros per megawatt hour by 2050.
Wow.
Even if you ignore the carbon cost, which is probably unrealistic long term, it still climbs to about 75 euros per megawatt hour. It just gets more expensive.
So sticking with the current plan actually makes electricity more expensive for Nigeria in the long run. What about the BPS, the renewable path?
It's the complete opposite trend. The LCOE starts around 54 euro MW wards back in 2015, and in the renewable BPS scenario, it declines.
Declines? To what level?
By 2050, just looking at the power sector alone, it drops to about 46 euro MWh. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
There's another version, BPS 3, where they integrate the power system with other sectors, like desalination and producing industrial gases.
Sector coupling.
Right. And in that integrated scenario, the overall LCOE drops even further. down to just 35 euros per megawatt hour by 2050.
35 euros. Okay, let's just pause there. 35 euros on the renewable path versus 75 or even 120 on the current path.
Exactly. And remember that diesel generator cost 140 to 220 euro as equivalent.
So this renewable future isn't just cleaner. It offers power potentially 75% to 85% cheaper than what millions pay now for unreliable backup power. That's transformative.
It's a massive economic argument.
Yeah.
And of course, the environmental outcome matches. The BPS pathways hit zero CO2 equivalent emissions by 2050. Complete decarbonization.
While with CPS.
Emissions just keep rising. It fails economically and environmentally.
Okay, so the economic case for renewables seems overwhelming based on this study. What technologies actually deliver this low-cost renewable system? What's the backbone?
The study is very clear. Two technologies are absolutely paramount: solar photovoltaics, PV, and batteries.
Solar and storage? Why them?
Well, the economics are just incredibly favorable now, and they keep getting better. Plus, Nigeria is smack in the middle of the Sun Belt. Fantastic solar resources.
So lots of sunshine makes solar panels very productive. What kind of scale are we talking about?
Huge scale. By 2050, in the main BPS scenario, the total installed solar PV capacity reaches 181 gigawatts. A lot of that, about 125 gigavolue, is utility scale using single-axis trackers to follow the sun.
But it's not just big solar farms, is it?
No, and this is crucial. The study highlights the importance of decentralized power. PV prosumers.
Meaning rooftop solar?
Exactly. Rooftop solar on homes, on businesses, typically paired with their own lithium-ion batteries. These smaller distributed systems are vital. They actually account for about 22% of all the generated solar electricity by 2050 in the model.
Interesting. So it's a mix of big and small solar. What about other renewables? Wind, hydro?
They definitely play a role. Wind, existing hydro, a bit of geothermal, some bioenergy, they all contribute to the mix. But solar PV is clearly the dominant generation source, cost-wise. Concentrating solar power, CSP, didn't turn out to be as competitive in this analysis.
Okay, so massive solar generation backed by batteries. But getting to 100% renewables, especially with intermittent sources like solar, requires more than just generation capacity. You need flexibility, right? How does the system handle that?
Absolutely critical. You need flexibility across different timescales. The study models a portfolio approach to storage.
A portfolio, meaning different types.
Yes. For short-term balancing, like smoothing out solar output during the day or shifting power for a few hours, you rely heavily on those cost-effective lithium-ion batteries.
Okay, daily cycling. What about longer periods? Cloudy days, weeks?
That's where medium and long-term storage come in. The model includes things like thermal energy storage, TES. But crucially, for seasonal balancing and sharing power through lower sun periods, it relies on gas storage.
Gas storage? But isn't this a renewable scenario?
It is. The gas isn't fossil gas. It's synthetic natural gas, SNG, or biomethane, produced using renewable electricity.
Ah, so power to gas technology. You make clean fuel when renewables are abundant and store it.
Precisely. And those gas turbines, which are common in Nigeria now. In the BPS, any new ones built after 2015 are designed to run on these renewable gases, SNG or biomethane.
So they're repurposed.
Effectively, yes.
Yeah.
They transition from fossil fuel burners to flexible backup, running on clean fuels, ready to fill the gaps on daily, weekly, even monthly timescales when needed. Old tech, new clean fuel.
Okay, that handles flexibility over time. Storage holds energy for later use. But the grid itself provides flexibility across space, moving power where it's needed, when it's needed. How important is the transmission grid in this?
Hugely important, especially given Nigeria's geography. The optimization model leans heavily on transmission.
How so?
The northern subregions, like NIG, NW, and NIGN, have the best solar resources in the country, but lower population density compared to the south.
So ideal places to build large solar farms.
Exactly. The model shows these northern regions becoming massive power generation hubs. Their local LCOE is calculated to be about 17% lower than in the southern importing regions.
Meaning they produce power cheaper up north.
Right. So they generate vast amounts of cheap solar power and then export it south to the major demand centers.
What kind of export numbers are we talking?
Significant. Take the Northwest region, NIGNW. By 2050 in the BPS-1 scenario, the model shows it exporting around 200 terawatt-hours of electricity annually.
200 TWh, that's enormous. That must require a pretty robust grid.
Absolutely. A very strong, high-voltage national transmission network is essential to shuttle all that cheap northern solar power southwards efficiently. It's fundamental to achieving that low overall system cost. Moving power geographically is key.
Okay, let's circle back to that lowest cost scenario, BPS-3, the one that hit 35 euro MWh through sector coupling. You mentioned desalination and industrial gases. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So BPS-3 integrates the power system with providing energy for large-scale seawater desalination, crucial for water security, and also for producing non-energetic industrial gases, things like hydrogen or ammonia, perhaps for fertilizer or industry, made via electrolysis.
And adding these huge new demands, you said 290 TWh just for the gas sector by 2050 somehow lowers the overall electricity cost? That still feels backwards.
I know, it seems counterintuitive. But it works because of scale and flexibility. These new industrial demands, especially things like electrolysis for gas production, don't necessarily need power at peak times, like 6 p.m.
They can run when power is cheap and plentiful.
Exactly. They can be scheduled to soak up the massive amounts of super cheap solar generation during sunny days, energy that might otherwise be curtailed.
Curtailed, meaning wasted. Produced, but not used or stored.
That's right. Curtailment is a big challenge in very high renewable systems. If you generate more solar than the grid needs and your batteries are full, you might have to just turn off the solar panels. Wasted energy, wasted investment.
So these new industrial loads act like a giant sponge for cheap solar.
A flexible sponge, yes. They increase the overall utilization of those low-cost solar assets, spreading the capital cost over more kilowatt hours, which brings the average cost, the LCOE, down for everyone.
Okay, that makes sense. And this leads to another really interesting finding in the study, something about how batteries and gas production interact.
Yes, this was genuinely fascinating from an engineering perspective. They call it the battery-to-power-to-gas effect, or battery to PTG.
Battery to PTG. Okay, break that down. We know PTG is power to gas, using electricity to make fuel. Yeah. How do batteries get involved before the gas production?
So think about it. In these scenarios, with tons of cheap solar, your batteries get filled up during the day. Then maybe demand drops overnight. Grid doesn't need much power, sun isn't shining.
Right.
Instead of letting the batteries just sit there, or instead of only using grid power for PTG, the system is optimized to do something clever. When grid demand is really low, like in the middle of the night, energy stored in the batteries is discharged specifically to power the electrolyzers that are making the synthetic natural gas.
So the battery doesn't just feed the grid, it directly feeds the gas production plant overnight.
Why?
Why? Why not just use grid power if it's available?
It's all about optimizing the whole system cost. Doing it this way, discharging batteries into the PTG units during low demand hours achieves two key things.
Okay.
First, it directly uses energy that might otherwise be difficult to utilize, further reducing that curtailment problem, less wasted solar. Second, it deliberately empties the batteries overnight,
making space for the next day's solar surge.
Exactly. It prepares the batteries to absorb the maximum amount of cheap solar energy the very next day. This whole battery to PTG cycle means you actually need less dedicated PTG charging capacity overall because the batteries help buffer and time shift the energy input. And less capacity means lower capital costs.
That's really clever system design. The study quantified this effect.
It did. In the BPS-3 scenario for 2050, it estimated about 26 terawatt-hours of energy would flow directly from batteries to the PTG charging process. It's a significant optimization.
Amazing. Okay, before we wrap up, we have to touch back on the current policy scenario. If the renewable pathway modeled in the study is so much cheaper and more effective, what's the final verdict from this research on Nigeria's existing plans for new nuclear and coal power?
The study is unambiguous on this. It finds that investments in new nuclear and new coal plants are simply not economically competitive compared to the renewable pathway.
Not competitive. And there are other issues too.
Yes, beyond just the direct costs, the study points out the huge risk profile. These projects violate basic sustainability criteria. You've got massive upfront capital costs, inherent safety concerns, particularly with nuclear.
And delays, cost overruns.
Huge risks there. The study notes that globally, nuclear projects have averaged, I think it was 117% cost overruns. These large, centralized fossil fuel and nuclear projects are just incredibly risky financially and environmentally compared to the modular, predictable, and rapidly falling costs of solar PV and batteries.
So pulling all this together from our deep dive into pathways to a fully sustainable electricity supply for Nigeria in the midterm future, the main message seems crystal clear.
It really is.
Transitioning Nigeria to a fully carbon-neutral energy system by 2050 isn't just a dream. This research shows it's technically possible, and crucially, it's the cheapest way forward.
Definitely. That €35 megawatt figure for the integrated renewable system BPS-3 is dramatically lower than sticking with the current fossil fuel plans, and orders of magnitude cheaper than the reality of diesel generation for millions today.
The economics point decisively towards renewables, led by solar and batteries.
Which means the real hurdles aren't technological or even primarily economic anymore. It boils down to political will.
Policy choices.
Exactly. The study implies a need for strong, clear policy signals, interventions that actively restrict new investments in fossil fuels and nuclear, and instead channel capital aggressively towards scaling up PV and battery deployment, alongside grid upgrades.
And there's one final piece of data from the study that really underscores the feasibility concerning land use.
Ah, yes. That's often raised as a concern for large-scale renewables, isn't it?
Oh,
Land area.
right. But this study actually calculated the total land footprint needed for all the solar PV and wind turbines in the 100% renewable BPS-1 scenario.
And the result?
Just 2,409 square kilometers. Which sounds like a lot, but in the context of Nigeria.
It's tiny. That's only about 0.3% of Nigeria's total land area. It's simply not a limiting factor.
So abundant resources, minimal land use, and drastically lower costs.
Which brings us to the final thought for you, the listener, drawn directly from the implications of this research. Given that Nigeria has abundant renewable resources, that the land requirement is negligible, and that clean technologies offer reliable power at a fraction of the cost of the current crisis system, potentially up to 5 times cheaper. The powerful question arising from pathways to a fully sustainable electricity supply for Nigeria in the midterm future is this. Can Nigeria leverage these economic findings to effectively bypass the entire era of expensive, polluting, centralized fossil fuels and leapfrog directly into a truly modern, affordable, and sustainable 21st century clean energy economy?